Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla stock. Let's go over what the hell happened today after, honestly, a surprisingly not too bad delivery numbers. Everyone and their mother, including people that are usually accurate with their delivery numbers, were expecting substantially lower. So the delivery numbers actually came in still overall, the trend isn't great, but a lot better than people anticipated, and Tesla popped a beautiful 5%. So let's go over what this means. Is Tesla back? Is it back to bull mode, or is there still something to watch out for? I'll give you my honest thoughts, and if you enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice, and I am not a financial advisor. And of course, if you enjoy my technical analysis, I do share my thoughts with my members every single day the market is open. Definitely check that out. That link is down below. For just $3 a month, you get access to my Tesla tier, constantly sharing updates, posts up, options flow, etc. $5 a month adds NVDA to that if you're interested. $7 adds non-Tesla, non-NVIDIA stocks. For instance, one of which I can share. I mean, I talked about Apple. Apple has been performing pretty well. I've been talking about Starbucks. Starbucks is also doing very, very well. And Ionic U, actually, I personally already exited this one. But Ionic U, where's Ionic U? I had it right here. I put it down somewhere because once I stopped looking at them, I stopped looking at them. But up 11% today, actually. So I alerted this one today, this morning, actually, when it was only 2%. So that was like a 9% day right there. That's pretty nice. But nonetheless, jumping into it, if you're interested, link is below. But jumping into it, Tesla, what is there to talk about here, right? What's happening? Well, there's actually a lot to talk about, and there's a lot of things I want to go over. I actually want to really quickly start on the monthly, very, very quickly. Why? Because, well, we just closed June and we just started July. The monthly is a very interesting situation, right? And this is something I want to kind of get out of the way before I forget about it. It's getting very tight. Right? It's getting very tight. So most often, whenever you see monthly price action, for instance, here, we had an interesting candle, right, where we had a nice bullish engulfing on the monthly, and then, beautiful move higher, pretty nicely higher too. That went from 200 all the way to 300, right? Absolutely beauty of a move. But for the most part, you don't see too many things like candle patterns on the monthly, not too often at least, right? Here you kind of had one that was a bit of a false breakout actually, but we're doing something similar, but nicer in my opinion, which is right here. This is going to potentially, there is a chance that Tesla actually does nothing and pretty much stays in between, like, let's say 270 to as high as 350, that almost $100 range, which is a pretty big range nonetheless. But there is a chance that even during July, it stays within this range. But the main thing to look out for, and the main reason I'm bringing this up, is the fact that price action is getting tight on the monthly, because you can see all of July's price action was contained within May's candle. We didn't go above or below the top or the bottom range of the price range of May. We were completely contained within. That's essentially an inside day candle, well, in this case, an inside month candle. And obviously July is opening up once again, well, pretty much right dead smack in the middle between the price range of June, right? So this essentially implies, to me at least, the fact that the price action is getting very, very tight. It actually looks very similar, so nice little move up here. This actually looks very similar to the way Apple looked like on the weekly. Let me show you Apple on the weekly, right? You can see Apple, kind of the same idea, just on the weekly time frame. Same idea, nice move up to the upside. And you can see how tight it was getting, right? Getting very, very, very tight. And then it finally exploded, which is why I personally entered Apple like $200 per share. Up a nice amount so far on that. Pretty happy. I actually think Apple can go even higher personally. But nonetheless, right, Tesla on the monthly is setting up a very similar situation here. Maybe even on the weekly. The weekly is kind of like that too. Honestly, it has a bit of a tightened looking flag to it. Potentially a bull flag actually. But the monthly is setting up in a similar fashion as well to what I just showed you on the Apple, right? So, we could, there is a chance that we actually kind of still sort of chop between these levels, maybe for even a couple more months, potentially. But the main reason I'm bringing this up before I, jump into the other information is, if July happens to be the breakout month, a break above or below June's high or low, so in other words, about almost 360 to as low as about 270, above or below those, should yield closer to low 400s from the bullish perspective, or closer to low 400s or low 200s from the bearish perspective if you break above or below. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on that. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's go to the daily chart, right? This is where things are a little more interesting in the more shorter-ish time frame. What the hell happened here? Well, yesterday, obviously, we had that breakdown below the channel. But I mentioned, yes, it's a bearish, situation. Yes, it is bearish breaking down below. Yes, it's not looking amazing. But we have a major catalyst today. And I don't like coming to full conclusions, number one, off of just simply one candle usually, but especially when that one candle is the day before a potentially major catalyst, right? And like I said, today is a major catalyst. It's like a mini earnings. It can go either way. And with Tesla falling that aggressively, obviously, it was essentially a buy the news. And honestly, the numbers just simply weren't as bad as people were expecting, which is another reason why Tesla popped. And if I go to the 15-minute time frame, you can see it started off actually almost giving up all the gains, came right back into the resistance of yesterday's price action, acted as a support, and then of course it ended up having a nice follow through. And so far it's actually looking pretty okay here on the 15-minute time frame. So let's see how that plays out. But The main thing I want to go over, and the main thing that's important to me on the time frames here, on the daily at least, is number one, we actually closed back above the 200-day moving average, not super convincingly, albeit, right, only about $1.50 higher, but hey, above it nonetheless, so not too bad. But the main thing I'm watching is this, and this is going back to structure, right? This is going back to structure. Also, I guess I should mention quickly on the 4-hour chart, I did mention yesterday how the 4-hour SMI was pretty much near the bottom of the barrel. And, this told me that at the very least, if the numbers were bad, we shouldn't go too much lower. But, the SMI once again coming in pretty clutch. But the main thing, I digress. The main thing I'm gonna look at right now is structure. This is the most important thing to me right now. There's the structure of this move and what needs to be done next for the bulls to either continue and go potentially substantially higher, maybe even closer to the 400s, assuming we break this trend line here, of course, or the bears obviously still have a good shot at defending this and actually setting this lower. So let's go over the most important levels right here. So first and foremost, the bulls want to pretty much hold about 310. Again, we are in this rising trend line or channel, and we are back within it. So this can be now viewed as a false breakdown, which is actually bullish. But as long as the bulls essentially maintain about $310 and don't close a daily candle back below about 310, which in other words will be another closure down below this trend line, the rising daily channel, the bulls have a real shot here. The bulls have a real shot here. Now, this move right here reminds me in a very similar way to this move up here, right? Remember we had this false breakout and everyone was bearish up here, and then ended up just having, pretty much a false breakout, and then it just completely crashed down below. But the key thing here is when we were doing this move, I mentioned many times how, this could still be fine as long as the 333 to 335 region holds. It didn't, right? We obviously closed well below that at like 328 on the day after. The same situation is setting up, but the opposite, right? So again, the reason I said 323 was important here to hold is because, well, we could still hold this area that was obviously a major resistance and bounce and continue higher, right? That still could have been the complete, a very real possibility. We didn't. We closed below. Bulls lost their grip on that key level that they shouldn't have, and that resulted in a substantial move lower, right? We went from 335 to like 290. Pretty decent move lower, right? That alone was essentially about almost a 13% move lower. Now the opposite is happening, right? We had a potential false breakdown the way we had a potential, or not potential, literal false breakout over here. Now we're coming back into this area. Now the way I look at it is this 315 to 320 zone is essentially this 333 to 335 zone just flipped. Here, again, up here, the bulls, they weren't allowed to lose this zone. And if they did, bearish continuation. That's not good, right? Same thing here, but now the bears are in control, arguably. And as long as the bears defend 315 to 320, that's very good for the bears. However, if the bears this time lose grip on this sort of $5 range, the same way the bulls lost their grip here and we had a pretty decent move to the downside, if the bears lose their grip at 315 to 320, the exact same thing will happen, but the opposite direction, and this time in the bullish favor, right? Obviously, we're not there yet, right? We haven't, the bears haven't lost their grip yet. But that's the most important thing to watch out for, because if it does happen, and if the bears do lose their grip on that $5 range, and this range goes from being, so far potentially seeming to be, obviously an area of massive support, now potentially into a massive area of resistance, the bears, what they want to do is just do something like this into a move lower, right? That's what the bears want to do. But kind of like what the bulls wanted to do here, massive area of resistance. They wanted to turn this into support and then go higher. Instead, they lost it, turned it back into a resistance and headed lower. The bears want to avoid this. The bulls want the exact same thing to happen, but this time against the bears. Hopefully that makes sense. So in other words, it would look something like this. So instead of just rejecting and going like this lower, which is the bearish situation, of course, the bulls wanted to go back above higher like this and then turn it into support the same way they did here with the break down below this key level and then head higher. Hopefully that makes sense, right? Hopefully that makes sense. But essentially, to make it simple, this 315 to 320 area is essentially the 333 to 335 zone up here, just in the exact opposite direction. And yeah, I mean, it's really that simple in my opinion. And I do believe that if the bulls do reclaim this range, if they do reclaim 315 to 320, which again, could also happen pre-market, right? Sometimes the cheat code to reclaim and to get above or below, kind of sticky resistance or support zones is a gap up or a gap down. So even if Tesla gets a 1% gap up, let's say overnight, tomorrow morning, whatever, and it opens up the day at like 318, 319, something like that, that would be a good start. And then from there, this most likely will turn into a support and we head higher. So, sometimes it's a bit of a cheat code to get a gap up or down above or below certain key levels. So let's see if this actually occurs or not. But that's what I'll be looking for moving forward. This level to me is the most important level. If the bears defend this level successfully, yeah, we actually could still get a substantial rejection and a closure below about 310 in my opinion, which is going to be once again below that daily rising channel, is a major red flag if it were to happen again. But again, reclaiming this for the bulls, very, very powerful, and we'll do the exact opposite of this move here, but to the upside instead. So that's kind of my main analysis right now on Tesla stock, moving forward and to see how it goes out. And again, we also have, of course, the exponential moving averages right here sitting so far, potentially acting as a resistance, which is another reason why I do want the stock and Tesla. If it's going to happen, I do want to see it, maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow's a half day. Keep that in mind. The market's closed on Friday, so maybe not tomorrow, but maybe on Monday, right? Maybe on Monday. I do want to see this happen sooner than later before these exponential moving averages have a chance to fully cross to the bearish side, and both of them essentially, the 9 and the 21, below the 50. So I want to see this happen sooner than later for sure. By latest, like early next week, like Tuesday, like earliest I would say, or latest I would say. But nonetheless, that's what I'm looking for. And the very, 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 very final thing I'll talk about before I end off the video is sometimes what I like to look for potentially early signs of a bottoming, or at the very least like a reversal in trend, right? In which in this case, obviously, this reversing this downtrend, if you will, is the MACD, right? The MACD here. I like to look for higher lows even being set, right? Similar to people that follow Peter DiCarlo, he has the same thing on the BX Trender. I like to look at it more on the MACD. Same idea though, where now you can see the MACD printed a higher low on the histogram with today's close. That's a good sign. That to me is a sign that potential reversal is taking place, as long as the stock essentially does not make a lower, or the histogram on the MACD does not make a lower low once again. So we can continue hopefully making these higher lows, kind of like we did it here. You can see, you can see kind of made these higher lows, went green, and we had this beautiful move to the upside. Same idea here, and this is kind of what I would like to see. Something like this start developing over here, right? Of course, if we reclaim that 315 to 320 zone, this most likely will make this, a very high probability of happening. Hopefully that's it. I think that's all I want to say. A lot of information, because it was a pretty delicate situation the stock was in. So let's see how it goes from here. The levels to look out for. Again, 315 to 320, to me, by far the most important area. If the bears defend, this still can go pretty bearish, and Tesla can still go decently lower. If the bulls reclaim, we should get a nice reversal, in my opinion. So all in all, that's all I got for you. Options flow, nice little bullish leaning, in my opinion, towards the end of the day. So let's see how this translates. Tomorrow is half a day. Friday, the market is closed. So we may have to wait until early next week, but all in all, thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.